Thanks everyone for attending. This event is in collaboration with the University of East London and Conscious Isolation, which Sam and I set up at the start of lockdown. We've been holding online events for the last few months, mostly online artist talks and some panel discussions, and also offering free tutorials and crits to art students who lost access to their facilities during lockdown, and we've been doing some online exhibitions as well. So Ben, thank you so much for talking to us today from Brighton. I'm just going to give you a quick intro and then I'll let you take off. So we've got Ben Woodeson speaking to us today, and he dividing his time between Roswell, New Mexico and Brighton on the south coast of England. Artist and curator Ben Woodeson was born in London and studied at Glasgow School of Art. He has recently spent time researching and making work in New Mexico, Wisconsin, Mexico, Vietnam, Spain, Germany and England. Woodeson has exhibited extensively throughout Europe and North America. Recent exhibitions include Between One Thing and Another at William Bennington Gallery in 2018, Burning Ring of Fire at Amarillo Museum of Art in 2018, Island Glass Biennale at NCAD in 2017, Midway Between Immortality and Certain Death at the Roswell Museum and Art Centre in 2017, the London Open at the Whitechapel Gallery in 2015, and Obstacle at Bologna Gallery in 2015. He has been selected for exhibition by a range of international creators, including Simon Thathel, Christopher Gansing, Anne Jones, Andres Mengs, Ben Roberts, Mike Stubbs, Virginia Torrente, Mark Olivier Waller, Mark Wallinger and others. And Woodeson has curated selected various projects and exhibitions, including Solid Gone for Sidoni Gallery in Wilkes-Barre, Morphization for APT Gallery and the Nottingham Castle Open. He is the director of Art Roswell, a new curatorial organisation that plans to bring artists and artworks to Roswell, New Mexico for public art projects and curated citywide exhibitions. Okay, Ben, thank you so much. I'll let you take the floor.
Thank you, Susie, and thank you everyone. Thank you, Conscious Isolation and University of East London. Got to be said, having your own introduction read back to you like that is horrible. Anyway,
sorry.
you did it well, but it's when you sit there and you think like, God, I sound like a twat. But anyway, thank you. And just to say, so I'm used to giving lectures, as most teachers are. What I'm not used to doing is sitting talking at a laptop for an hour or so, and I can't see any of you, and I don't know if any of you are there. So this is a very strange thing. So we shall see how it goes. I sort of chopped some of my early history off this talk because there's quite a lot to talk about, but sort of to do with the pandemic and COVID and the lockdown. But I figured I should start at this point in my time, which is around 2008, because we're in a massive crisis, and back then we were in a massive crisis, and I was in a massive crisis. So if you can see that, you'll see it's me whinging about being stuck, and I was properly, utterly, conclusively stuck. I'd been out of my master's for 6 or 7 years at that point, doing quite well, showing a lot, and I hated everything I was making. And I was just mentally, I couldn't come up with something I liked. And that lasted for a year, and was not comfortable. And I think anyone that creates stuff gets, that will happen, but it's not pleasant. And then I was sort of sitting there, and I was just sitting in my studio at my desk one time, scribbling and drawing. And I thought, what do I want to do? And I just thought, I want to make dangerous work. And that started a whole series of work that lasted for, well, is still ongoing in a way, although I've moved away from it. And for a long time, I called these works the health and safety violations, because they were deliberately intended to be troublesome. You know, I was challenging myself, I was challenging the viewer, I was challenging the gallery, the curator, and so on. So this piece, for example, this was shown at Kunstakademien in Copenhagen, and it was 33,000 ball bearings scattered on the floor. People had to sign a liability waiver, and they were invited to enter the space, to walk on them, roll on them. And I'd never shown anything like this, and it scared the poop out of me, because I thought people would be really sort of careful. And as you can see from this photo, not a bit of it. This guy is literally taken a running leap and is surfing, skating across the ball bearings. Really weird, really weird. I had to go. I actually went away from work. You know, there was an intern with the sort of sign-in sheet, liability waiver. I went away and had a quiet beer outside. I was just so worried about it. But there really was. I realized there was something definitely there that was interesting. It was interesting me, and so I felt actually interested again in what I was, the idea of creating work. And as I said, so these were all called the health and safety violations. So this was number 7. And then I started making this sort of whole range of different works across different media, but all with this sort of intention to challenge or shock. Some were quite self-contained. This piece was very self-contained, and it was controlled. It didn't react to people. There was no motion sensor. It was controlled by a little microcontroller, and it would turn on or off. So the sort of the motor would turn, the arm would swing, the wire brushes would make this sort of horrendous scrapey, insecty noise. And then, of course, a very quiet gallery, people would be sort of shocked by it. And obviously, I don't mean culturally shocked. They're just like, whoa, what is that? And there was really something there. I mean, by this point, we're talking, I guess, 2010, and sort of showing these things around. This was just literally a club hammer, a lump hammer on a length of bungee cord, connected up to a cheap hammer drill, a DIY drill, and a microcontroller. And so just periodically it would just spin, and the bungee cord would just be shortened and shortened and shortened and shortened until the point where it the sort of the tension in the bungee overcame the friction against the wall, and then it would gradually undo, and the hammer would belt the hell out of the wall. And as you can see, it basically broke through the wall, took the plaster off the wall, etc. And this, again, there'd be long periods of silence. So people are doing that art thing. They're wandering around, quietly, stroking their beards and quietly looking at the work. And then suddenly, boom, 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 this sort of semi-deafening noise. So, I was making quite a lot of these, but I mean, what is this one? Health and safety violation number 36. So this is quite an abridged or abbreviated sort of showing of them. This was definitely the biggest. I got asked to make a piece for Transmediale in Berlin, and in the discussion, they actually initially wanted a piece that I didn't dare show. So I had a work that I'd made. It was on my website, which was a Berlin cobblestone suspended from a motor in a gallery space, and it was swinging very fast around the gallery. And basically, I was not prepared to physically show this. It was on the website, it existed, but it literally would, as far as I was concerned, it was too dangerous. If that cobblestone had hit someone, it would have killed them instantly. So it really was crossing the line. And Transmediale, Christopher Gansing was like, well, I quite want this. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not showing that. So then we talked, and I'd started making works that electrocuted people using livestock electric fences. And so this wonderful thing happened where we discussed it. I drew up plans. I flew into Berlin one weekend, and the Transmediale technicians had built a sort of a miniature trial version of this. And then I flew back the next week for the actual festival, and they had made this massive piece. And the copper rods, you can see, are alternately positively and negatively charged. So touching both of those, you get electrocuted. All was going absolutely fine until about an hour before the festival opens in the evening, which is what you can see in that image. And suddenly the venue realized that this was on their liability, and they were like, we're not opening, we're not showing this. So there was a lot of conversation, and so then we ended up with this sort of court, I'm not sure what they're called, but this sort of barriers, soft barriers around it. And the people you can see in red are guards, and they are, rather than guarding the work, they are guarding the people from the work, which I like. It got a lot of attention, and someone made this little GIF, which I found out about later. I love the fact that someone was making a GIF of my work, but it was, I always tested these works on myself. I've sort of semi-thematically grouped things in the sense that these still, now what you're looking at, this is called slice and dice. There's no glue involved, by the way. That is just wedged in there using gravity and friction. And I was sort of, not deliberately, but the work was moving away from these sort of big kinetic installations and becoming much less active. And one of the things I was thinking about very much at the time was that if those kinetic works were switched off, then effectively it was as if they didn't exist. So I wasn't viewing them as sculpture as such, but I was viewing them as almost as performative. For quite a few years, I really made, it was just like glass everywhere. And I work, at this point, certainly I was working very intuitively and through physical experimentation. So I would get glass in the size that it was sort of available from the glass sellers. I would try something, and usually the glass would break. So I would try bending it or suspending it, it would break. Then I would scale it back. I would put less physical pressure on the material. So these works very much, they're on the verge of not existing. This one that you're looking at now, that bit from the Omen, yes, that bit, the glass is not glued. It is literally just, it was balanced, and a couple of times it got shown a lot, and a couple of times when it was shown, you could hear the glass chittering as people's footsteps vibrated the floor. You could feel this, you could hear this like kind of almost subsonic scratching. Yeah, it got a lot of attention. It was challenging, but it was also really quite dangerous. And so I sort of kept experimenting, kept playing with different materials, buying things, just literally doing things like going on eBay. What could I find? So there's the shelf, the bar, the black bar you can see in this photo was literally being thrown away by the college where I was running a course. And I just sort of plucked it off the cart that was taking it down to the skip. The stainless steel that's sort of bending over. I was just literally sitting on eBay, and this came up. I bought it. It turned out I'd actually bought it from another artist who needed a bit of it, cut off a bit, and then sold the remainder. And I used the remainder exactly as is. So they were really sort of playing with being precarious and challenging to the viewer, challenging to the gallerist, and so on and so forth. I'm dyslexic, as many artists are. So aberration, agitation, angst, 96 synonyms for unstable. And these were hand stamped into this sheet of brass. It was one of the worst weekends of my life because I was so absolutely convinced I was going to make a spelling mistake. So I was checking, lining it up, checking again. So it worked. I'm really happy with the piece. And I was curious to know with this one, if I could create a mental space using text that would start to address some of the same things as these very visceral and overtly fragile or aggressive works. I never turned down the opportunity to try something, to learn a new technique or material, which I will talk about later on. And this is a good example. I went to Alfred University in upstate New York on a fellowship. And they had a neon department, and I was basically able to bend my own neon. So bending neon, not sure what I was doing, learning the material, walking around hardware stores. Oh, those are not interesting. Big rat traps. Next thing, neons on the rat traps. Neon is wired in series. So basically, if the rat traps had got triggered, it would have shattered the glass and the piece would have been dead. So there started to be this real sort of, what will you, the viewer, do? What, obviously there was already the what will the gallery do, but what will the viewer do? Will they step inside it? Will they not? And unsurprisingly, of course, there was a lot of connection there, or direct correlation, if you like, between the private view and the amount that people are drunk, and whether they would step in or not, and whether they were cautious or not. Whitechapel Open, lovely, great experience. And I just wanted to put this in as a shout out to the Whitechapel, because institutions, I work within institutions, I know how tricky it is to show something that is challenging. And they very much came with the view of, yes, we can do this, now let's work out how we can do it. And I really appreciated that. I mentioned the neon. That was within an institution, and obviously neon is quite an easy thing to get done, but it's a difficult thing to develop a relationship with until you yourself have been involved with it. And I think that's true of many materials. When I was doing my BA at Glasgow, I traveled to America, to Atlanta, and I studied under George Beasley, who's very significant in the iron casting community, and I learned to do iron casting. And then, of course, I came back and I graduated, and then I had no access to iron casting. So for many years, this little sort of hunger was sort of just, I couldn't do it. Yeah, I couldn't access it. And especially because I'm working so directly with the materials, for me, it was very important that I was shaping the form, I was making the mold. In 2015, 16, I think 2016 actually, late 2016, I traveled to America, and I made this piece thanks to a professor called Coral Lambert, who had invited me to a big symposium. And these plates, they're not fixed down, they're just scattered. They're wobbling, they're trip hazards, and they were just left in this sculpture park. And I found out later that people at the time were like, "Yeah, we get this, we get the hazard, we really like this." And one of my sort of friends and colleagues was walking through the snow, forgot where they were, and went flying because of them. And so I guess job done. I was very lucky to be offered a fellowship in Roswell, New Mexico. I cannot recommend the Roswell Artists in Residence program enough. It is 12-month fellowship. Here is your house, here is your studio, here is some money, and depending on funding cycles, sometimes there is also money for materials. Your show in the museum is in 6 months or 7 months. So it's 12 whole months when all you do is think and make work. And it's an extraordinary experience. And I started hitting the hardware stores like Home Depot and Ace Hardware and all this sort of thing. So this work, for example, these are bits of pressed steel that I used for something to do with roof repair. They're bent at 90 degrees. So this piece is literally, it's like a house of cards, and they are, I don't know how best to describe it. They are exceedingly precarious. They're not necessarily dangerous to the viewer, but they're certainly, the viewer is dangerous to the work. And this was actually shown a few times, including at the Anderson Museum of Contemporary Art in Roswell, which is associated with the residency. And I have CCTV footage of someone at an event. They're alone in the gallery. They sort of walked up and they sort of look at it, and they reached out and they touched it, and the whole thing just cascaded down. Tremendous noise. And this man just froze, looked around and ran. Did not own up, but I've got footage of him and I know who he is. But he still owes me a bottle of whiskey, I think. Good Scottish single malt. So there's still glass in there. There's gravity, there's friction. There's the sort of things that get an object to stay in one place or not. And this is cast iron. By this point, I've been invited back into, if you like, back into the iron casting community in New Mexico. And so I was very lucky to make work at the Meadowlands Community College and Highland University. And it really took me back, because in a way, my iron casting thoughts and reactions were sort of 10 years old, if you like, more than 10 years old. So how could it fit within what I was doing now? And that is the thing I'm still working on. Hopefully some of you get the historical reference in The Artist with His Throat Cut title, very much reacting to the Giacometti piece, but also reacting against the slight misogyny within the title and turning it on myself. The residency compound and the Roswell Artists in Residence compound has an amazing kiln room. And so I was curving the glass, which I'd never been able to do, because when I was doing my BA and my MA, I was not yet working with glass. And so again, we have this thing. You learn a technique or you hear of a technique, but how do you access it? And luckily the fellowship have an amazing kiln room, as I said, and their attitude was very much, it's there to be used, knock yourself out. So I did. More iron casting, exceedingly heavy, and an egg. Neon, I'd love to say I made this myself, but I had it fabricated. And this is very much stepping back mentally to that sheet of brass with the text and seeing, okay, can I sort of start to have the same conversation, or can I continue having the same conversation, but just using text? And neon seemed to work extremely well, possibly because it is just so seductive. and also it has that energy. It sucks people in. Sheet glass, ceiling rings from the oil trade. Roswell is just north of a major oil producing region, so the local scrap yards have got some very interesting things, or at least interesting to me, and they're sort of changing their context. My exhibition in the museum, lots of glass, things on the floor, which are going to be coming back on. I love the idea of the vulnerability within the work. I love the fact that the people may hurt the work either deliberately or involuntarily. So all things come to an end. I left the fellowship, and I traveled to Mexico to do a smaller 1-month residency there and an exhibition. So this is the sort of Mexican pink, and I realized that I couldn't make neon there, but of course there's always a place that will do it. You might have to travel. So I found a neon shop or workshop, and they made this for me. It felt very strange doing this residency because there wasn't a workshop. Got so used to having a big studio and a workshop that I really started to use I'd always, like any artist, I have a camera phone and I make extensive use of it. That's, you know, I'm buying a new phone. The biggest thing is, what's the one with the best camera? So I started to I would walk the city inevitably, as I think a lot of us do. And I started to just make work, reacting, making photographic work. And that is something I know come back on as well. Still sort of, I traveled for a while, and then I actually traveled back to Roswell, and there are 2 compounds of artists' houses. One is the residency and one used to be the residency. And the used to be residency is called the Historic Compound, and it is possible to rent a house there for you know, for a month or 3 months or 6 months, or as long as you can afford, and it's extremely affordable. So I went back for 3 months, and I went back to see what I thought of Roswell when I wasn't on the fellowship. I also went back to Roswell because I'd met someone who was very nice, and I kind of wanted to find out whether there was legs to that and legs to Roswell and so on and so forth. So making quite a lot of these next works are made then, and I was working towards an exhibition in London at the William Bennington Gallery. And so some of this was pre-ordered, like the glass slices were made in the UK by a fabricator, but some of them were done using cast iron, which is what we're doing there. And the wonderful thing about the American cast iron community, if this is the sort of thing that attracts you, is this isn't a case of you go and talk to a fabricator or a foundry and they make it. You can do it yourself. So I'm one of the people pouring the iron there, and it's good shit. It's great. So I'd made a sort of a bunch of works in iron, and I'd gone through a lot of personal changes in my circumstances, and I was no longer the sort of course leader, course director, whatever, in London. I was doing bits of teaching, and I was under a hell of a lot less stress. I also, of course, had this sort of new relationship was starting to form. And suddenly there's color in the work. I'd never used color. I'd been almost bad-temperedly, rigidly pragmatic. The color of an object was the color it stayed. And suddenly I'm using color, but also glitter. I'm mixing glitter as if it's paint and glittering the objects. And there's obviously been a lot of discussion about whether glitter is something that can or can't be used. So I'm very careful about it. So leaving aside for a moment the issue about the sort of the environment and whether it's a viable material, there's also been a lot of discussion with friends and colleagues about glitter as a signifier. And my personal position is that you can use any material providing you are comfortable with what it is communicating. So I did have a few people who challenged me on this, and they were like, well, you know, I think holding a very narrow-minded view, which was you can't use glitter because you're not gay. And I was like, excuse me? You know, and so my position is very much, I acknowledge the camp qualities in the material, and I'm happy with that. I am moderately camp anyway, and I'm comfortable with that, and I'm comfortable with my orientation, etc., and comfortable with everyone else's orientation. But you know, glitter and cast iron. This piece is actually in the Royal Academy Summer Show this year, which it's the first time I've ever applied to it. Certainly when I graduated from Glasgow, I don't think any of us were really interested in it, but I feel it's actually changed as an exhibition, and as sort of, it's got better, if you like, or maybe that's arrogant to say, I'm not sure, but I think also inevitably it's 18, 19 years since I graduated, so you know, I'm sure that I am less angry than I was. I'm more comfortable. This is made, by the way, just very quickly by just scrunching up greaseproof paper and then pouring wax onto it. So making lots of forms very, very quickly, deciding which ones are interesting, and then working into them. But the actual shape, the creation of the shape, taking a minute, 2 minutes. That's something, again, I'm going to come back on. Glitter and glass. Foam. This is basically a seat that was lying around, and I carved up the seat, took out the foam. I think it was like a mattress cover kind of thing, and then just shaped it, and then soaked it in black enamel. So this one I love, but I have no idea how long it's going to last. Clay. Before art school, I used to do a ceramic evening class, and I went back to Roswell, as I said, and there's a fabulous ceramics teacher at the museum called Area Finch, and she has this wonderful sort of facility and invites artists, visiting artists, etc., to learn and to use it. So I made quite a lot of works out of ceramic, out of earthenware, and that's something that I'm still wrestling with now. These are all clay. The prints on the wall are digitized cyanotypes. So I'm sure you know that the cyanotypes have that sort of oh so recognizable blue. But I always struggled with that blue. So I made the cyanotypes just very quickly collaging pieces of glass. Again, the shape is very quick, very instant. And then and then I digitized them, and they're actually laser prints. Editions kind of thing. Curated an exhibition for the Sordoni Gallery as part of the Big Iron Conference that happens every year. I wanted to do something on the precarious within cast iron, and several people sort of gave me a look as if to say, like, hang on, fragility, you know, iron does not read as fragile. It's solid, it's heavy, it's dense, etc. But actually it is an incredibly fragile material. And so I was very curious if I could actually put this show together. It was an open submission exhibition, and I'm so glad I did. There were 43 artists, super well received, and a real pleasure to do. And one of the things that also I'm really happy about, which was very much a position I took, which was there had to be either equal numbers of genders or more women than men. And so there was one more female in this exhibition than there was males. And I really feel that's how things should be. We still have it's better than it was, but we've still got a long way to go in so many respects. So I was traveling a lot, and then I had a couple of back-to-back residencies. So I went to MIAD, which is the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design, and they have a digital open lab for fabrication. So I was creating sculpture in virtual reality, which were then being outputted via 3D printing. And you've heard me say this before, I'm coming back on that in a minute. Then I went up to the University of Ottawa for another residency, and the shapes in this acrylic are taken from holes in the ground in Mexico City. When I was first in Mexico City, it was just recently after the earthquake. There's a lot, I mean, it's pleasantly scruffy, shall we say, and I love it, and it's a fantastic place. But these were sort of photographs and drawings of like tiny holes or bigger holes in the city. These were then machined into the acrylic and filled with glitter. So this CNC machining was something I got to do at the University of Ottawa. So again, the idea of a university or an institution as a place to learn and access materials and techniques is wonderful. And of course, doing teaching and like communicating about your work and helping students and so on is wonderful. But there is also this issue within this, which is, what do you do when you leave? How do you keep making these works if you depend on something specific? Glass and clay, earthenware. Obviously, the glass is not glued; it's just sort of propped in there. When I went back to Roswell, it gave me a chance to resolve works that I'd made on the fellowship but never finished. So these glass plates have just been curved in a kiln over a form, and they are what they are. They're sharp glass, but they're also exceedingly vulnerable. One of the works made at MIAD, so this is what do you call it? This was made in virtual reality. It was then 3D printed. It was then glittered, and the little rail it's on is actually from recycled railway track from a uranium mine. So when you obviously, I love the idea of this, and is it radioactive? Is it not? And I obviously had to have these checked before I tried to fly home with them. And so having to explain to the Roswell Fire Department and their Geiger counter why I had these rails that might be radioactive, why they might be radioactive, and why I needed to know. There's quite a lot of conversation there, shall we say. Clay and glitter. Obviously, the glitter satisfies my craving for the precarious, for the fragility. It is a very fragile material. It will fade. These are coated and varnished with a UV protectant, but if you put this in direct sunlight, it's going to fade. It's also going to break if it falls. These are slumped glass painted with household emulsion. I knew what I wanted, but I didn't know how to choose the color. Color, as I said, was something for a long time I did not use. So I went into Home Depot, which is kind of the American equivalent of B&Q. And I was standing looking at all those, the color swatches. I'm looking at them, and then I'm like, oh, I like that. Stream yellow. Oh, that's a good type. That's a good name. Well, that's a good red down there. And there was, and that red was called No More Drama. So I drew a straight line across, which went across 13 colors. And this piece on the floor, there's, I think, 167 pieces of glass there, and they are painted with this household emulsion and 13 different colors, with yellow, the extreme yellow at one end and the No More Drama at the other. It took me 4 months. It is stupidly, annoyingly fragile, and I love it. it's still one of the things I'm most happy with. It's got the danger, it's got the vulnerability. Because I'm sure you've noticed I'm sort of moving away from the danger. And part of that, certainly than the shouty danger, if you like. I think part of the reason for that is I'd felt I'd done it. And if I was going to keep going with it, then the only thing I could really do was to make it more dangerous. But I'm slightly odd, but I'm not a psychopath. I did not want to hurt someone. The danger works were never about hurting someone. They were about challenging the viewer, the institution, myself. How far would anyone go? But that's why I pulled the piece from, I said no, that Transmediale could not show the swinging cobblestone. It was just too dangerous. So with this, yes, there's a hint of danger. It is vulnerable to us. We are, if you fall on that, it's not going to be pretty. And that is part of the ongoing discussion with works like that. How can they be shown? Do they have barriers? Instead of a barrier, is it possible to have a guard or whatever? And those conversations inevitably, I think, have to be. I think they're part of the job for any artist and any curator, but I think especially if you make kinetic work or work that is sort of physically challenging like this. So the works I made in virtual reality in Ottawa and Milwaukee, some of them stayed in the PLA, the cornstarch plastic. Sorry, excuse me 1 moment. Cheers. British, gotta have the tea. Some of them stayed in the PLA and the cornstarch plastic. This one, for example, is actually cast iron. So it's cast iron and it's lacquered, and then layers and layers of glitter and lacquer. And the thing with this is, of course, it's not dangerous and it's not particularly vulnerable. And so I was making these, and sometimes you just have to trust your intuition. And I wasn't really sure what I was doing with them, where it was they were going. And I went back to Mexico around this, just after this, and I was traveling around Mexico, and I was still taking photographs, and I was on my own. And like most artists, I love company, but I also love being on my own. I'm sort of classic introvert. And so I would just, somewhere like Oaxaca, which I cannot recommend enough, it's an amazing city to visit. It was warm, and I would go and I'd sit outside a bar, and I would have my iPad, and I would have a beer, and I would write. And I wrote this massive document to myself, basically looking at the older work, looking at the recent work, looking at where the work might go, looking at my influences, and just really sort of almost, not quite stream of consciousness, but almost like the longest artist statement ever written kind of thing. And it wasn't made for anyone else. It was just to help my thoughts process, if you like. And it over time, it took a while, but the next few works I'm going to show are actually all works that have been made during the pandemic and the lockdown. And I realized that I got very interested in the idea of a moment, of an important moment. And I started calling it the crucial instant. And so the shape that's cut into this glittered card, this is a shape of a pothole in Mexico City, and this is very typical, I think, of the way I work. I work with things, then I leave them, then I return to them. So I say I've moved away from the danger works. I'm sure I'll come back and do more of that in the future. But in the meantime, this pothole, and I'm just fascinated with the idea of whether someone does or doesn't fall into that pothole, whether they trip or they don't trip. And if they trip, do they hurt themselves? Do they not hurt themselves? And this tiny little insignificant thing that doesn't even know we exist. It's inert, but how positive or negative its impact could be on us as human beings or on our existence. And so these works, just working here in Brighton, I have a tiny room and a tiny desk. My studio is with my fiance in New Mexico, and so I can't really make sculpture during the lockdown, and I can't get there because the border's closed, and she can't get here because she'd have to quarantine and she runs her own business. So kind of like it sucked for everyone. It sucked, but at least I've been making work. And so the sort of the playing with the colors in this, the binary, the idea that something is positive or negative, and just literally just playing with that. Then starting to make digital prints and digital works, sort of examining what happens if I try to digitize and abstract the impact, or the physical impact of something on another thing. I've just finished a project that lasted through September for Mocha London, which is a fabulous space, and this was a sort of web project for them. And I guess, like all of us, I started to really depend on delivery drivers and Amazon, sadly, and mail order companies, especially for art materials. But it got to the point where I was getting excited if a delivery of like toilet cleaner or something arrived. I was just excited to have seen someone and to have had that not interaction with the person because they were keeping their distance, but there was a parcel and another human being had touched it, kind of thing. And so I made this series, which is called Maybe Maybe, and there is 83 prints combined with text, all unique. These are, you'll not be surprised to know, these all stem from the Mexico trips and from photography. And basically I printed them out, and I sort of semi-randomly selected from my address book and from other people's address books, and I posted them out across the world. So people were not expecting these, and suddenly they sort of, with no warning, they received this gift of a unique print. The only thing I asked was that if possible, that they acknowledge receipt by email to the gallery. I then used the time and date order of the receipt of those of those acknowledgements as the parameters for a concrete poetry work made using the same text and same images. That can be seen on my Instagram. There's an abridged version on my Instagram. It's also on Vimeo if you put my name up. I didn't want to put it as part of this PowerPoint because it's like 260 megabytes, and I could really see that not going well over the internet. But it's pretty much, it is what you would imagine. But the text order is randomized. So I'm thinking about this thing that I'm calling the crucial instant. And I'm realizing that a lot of the older works were made incredibly quickly, and that now I was looking at the idea of a crucial instant within my life, but also within history. And I started looking at, I guess, historically significant photographs is the best way of describing them. And of course, there's always that thing about news generally is miserable. You know, we don't turn on, especially not at the moment, but we don't turn on the BBC News and expect them to be saying, you know, Ben Woodeson had a really nice cup of tea today, because it's not news. It's always death and destruction. And I found that I loved the photographs, and of course they're historically important, significant photographs. So they, you know, most people will have seen them. So I took those photographs and I abstracted them. So I created, I am creating a new series, which is called, the series is called One Day, and each one has a title similar to this one. So One Day in November, and this one is One Day in May. And most of these are sort of horrendous things. So the Hindenburg airship catching fire, for example, you know, there's war, there's assassination, there's, I think the nicest thing I've used so far was Charles and Diana's wedding. And let's face it, that didn't exactly go very well for them, did it? But I'm sort of taking away all that negative contextual information, and I'm presenting this abstract, and it is neutral. But then what I've been doing, it connects back in a way to the selection of colors on the with the paint swatches. What I've been doing, I've been Googling happy color palettes and things like that. And, you know, let's face it, paint companies, designers, all the rest of it, they don't go around, they don't make something that is just like, this is the most depressing goddamn color palette you're ever going to see in your world. You know, so these are very much, I'm appropriating the happiness, if you like, filling the abstracted image with it, and I'm not revealing what the images are. So they are a negative, mostly. So far they're negative. But I'm not going to tell anyone what they actually are. And that is where I am at the moment. Sort of, I'm creating variation. These are digital prints. I am also working on larger collages for this same one-day series that I hope will be, if they work, they will be in an exhibition in London in a couple of weeks called Washing Line. And that is it. I thank you very much for your time. And I can't see you, so I don't know if there's anyone still there, but if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ben. Hopefully we should be able to get people typing questions in the chat.
I'm just trying to bring up the chat now.
If anyone has any questions.
Caroline, can I ask how casting with iron is different to casting with bronze? I've cast bronze here at UEL and love the process, so I just wonder why you chose iron. Okay, so a variety of reasons. Firstly, iron as a material. Sorry, Susie?
Sorry, no, I was just trying to stop you sharing your screen so we can just see you a bit bigger if possible, but don't worry if not.
I can do that.
And then I thought I'd muted you by accident, but I haven't.
So,
yeah, brilliant.
Do you still have my glowing paleness on a black background?
Yes. Yeah.
I ain't got nobody. Anyway, so, don't know where that came from. Better drink some tea. So, so iron and bronze. Okay, so historically, bronze is this super loaded art material. You know, that, you know, Rodin, probably Michelangelo for all I know. I mean, it just drips, it oozes, I am art. Whereas iron is this sort of, so, you know, it's the everyday material. I mean, I'm looking at the building opposite. It's an old building. The drain pipes are made from iron. It's so utilitarian. There is also the fact that iron cannot be cast in a normal crucible furnace, which is what most of the UK colleges have. I think Carnarvon is the only place that has an active iron furnace. There may be others, apologies if there is. In America, the iron casting community is incredibly tribal. And I don't mean tribal in the sense of football or whatever, where people hate, you know, I hate Atlanta or whatever. It's more, it is a community. And I've been part of that community during my BA, and I can see you, Susie. I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'm going to ask you later. I've been part of that community in Atlanta during my BA, But as I said, I moved away from it for like 12, 13 years, something like that. And I found it's incredibly supportive and exciting. You go to a place for, 3 days, 5 days, a month. You make molds, then you melt the iron, then you cast, you pour the iron yourself. It's moderately dangerous, but everyone wears really good protective clothing, otherwise you're not allowed near the furnace. It's just intensely exciting. So I hope that answers Caroline's question. It's also cheap. I mean, that blue thing, the iron in that piece probably cost me $5, $10 at most. Now, obviously, the casting process is expensive, but the bronze for that would have been £100 at a guess, £200, probably £100. I don't know. So it's a cheap utilitarian material, and I love it for that reason as well. Any other questions?
We've got a few questions.
Hit me with them. Are they the sort of questions going to make me look really silly?
No. Well, I've got a question. So obviously at the moment you're not able to make sculpture. I was wondering what your plans are for as soon as you are able to make larger scale work then. Actually,
I don't have any plans on that. It's a year and a half since I was last in Roswell. My studio is in Roswell, New Mexico. My fiance is in Roswell, New Mexico. Last year, I had a massive health issue that meant I couldn't travel. I can now, except of course now we can't travel. The American border is closed. I have a visa application that is sitting there waiting. I just don't know. I don't know what I'm going to make. Because
the correct answer, Ben, is our collaboration. Anyway, Sam's got some questions too, so we can pass them over.
Hey, Ben. Thanks a lot again. Really appreciate your time. Great talk, by the way. I'm actually sort of fascinated by you as a person. I've got a few questions just to ask you with regards to, I suppose. Well, one of my first questions is, are you an adrenaline junkie in any way, shape, or form? Like, do you get involved, or have you ever in adrenaline sports?
Okay, so that is an excellent question, and I'm just going to try something. I'm going to try turning on the light because I don't know if you guys can see me, but I'm conscious it's getting very dark here. But this may just like bleach me out. Does that work?
Not really.
It's very similar, but we quite like the effect.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go back. Tell me if I start being like a black room with no light and nothing visible. You let me know. So I do not think I am an adrenaline junkie. Okay. However, there was some very interesting research done many years ago, and I can't remember exactly when they brought in the car seatbelt law. So for those of you who are dead young, there didn't used to be a legal requirement to wear a seatbelt in a car. Then they brought it in. There was research done, and basically after they brought in that law, the physical injuries to car drivers and car passengers went down, but the physical injuries to pedestrians, cyclists, etc. went up. So one of the possible conclusions was that people were being more aggressive and driving faster because they felt safer.
Interesting.
And so there is this, I can't remember technically what it's called, but basically people have a sort of a level of risk that they will accept for themselves. And it varies. We talk about being risk averse or adrenaline junkie or whatever. So I like skiing. Well, I haven't skied for a long time. I have done scuba diving. I have done parascending, and I ride a motorcycle, and I ride a bicycle. I mean, actually, until recently, i.e. the health thing I referred to, until recently, the worst scar I have is from a bicycle accident. Not anymore, sadly. I don't think that that is particularly being an adrenaline junkie. Casting iron is actually not frightening. I mean, yeah, the first time, because the heat coming off the crucible as you carry the crucible, there's two of you, and it's in a sort of with a bar, and it's this pot is between you, and the first time you do it, it's terrifying, but then you realize afterwards it's not terrifying. You're careful, and yes, there is a risk, but it's not risky kind of thing. And
I know you mean
like base jumping. I'm sorry, I think that base jumping, or rock climbing, I'm happy for anyone to do it, but not a chance in hell am I ever going to do that. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I guess it does. We've got some more questions here as well, from Sophie. Where did you find your inspiration during lockdown? Okay,
so my own head and my laptop. So the works I've been making during the lockdown, they stemmed from the photographs and the drawings that I made in Mexico and Vietnam and places like that. And the way I work tends to be quite sequential. So I'll make something, it will lead to something, it will lead to something else, it will lead to something else. Then I'll go off to us on a side tangent, and that will lead to something else. So I already had these images, and I was just processing. They were just literally photographs, and then some of the photographs became artworks in their own. I'm going to turn on the light because you can't see me at all, can you? Can you?
It's great. You just see your head.
Okay, well, that's fine. Yeah, I can live with that. Okay. So basically, the photographs, and then they became drawings, and so on and so forth. And then I would make something, and I'd look at it, and then I'd sort of abstract it on the laptop, and then I'd think, well, okay, that makes me wonder about what if a physical thing hits the paper, then that became the impact points. And then I started to think about impact points, and I started to think about impact points on our culture, on our history. And so then that led to me thinking about historical images, and so that led me to things like the Hindenburg and all sorts of things. And stuff also comes. I mean, my heritage. I'm not Jewish, but my grandfather was a very well-known German Jewish artist who fled the Nazis. So my grandparents never married, so I'm not Jewish, but I have what do you want to call it, an affinity with Jewish culture, an admiration for it, if you like. And so one of the things I've been reading up about is a Jewish ballerina who was in one of the camps and basically distracted the guards, snatched a pistol, and then killed 2 guards. So there's these awful stories, as everything is, especially with the Holocaust. But also at the same time, I found myself thinking, well, how wonderful for this, pardon the cliche here, and it's not what I believe, but this like weak ballerina, that she basically kicked the crap out of 2 SS guards and shot them. And it's like, well, and she died, but what a wonderful way to die, at least, rather than just being gassed like so many millions were. So sort of positivity and negativity, and just literally, for me, the lockdown, it's a strange and weird thing, but it's also I've had a lot of time in my own head just to think stuff through. And I think that's, in that sense, it's been quite good for some artists. Before I go on to anything else, I just want to come back. Caroline has said that she's upset she can't get near an iron foundry. Carnarvon, I've got contact details with the university there, so I could always put someone in contact, and I don't know whether, maybe there's something could be worked out there. But also, just to say, if you're based in London, near to Broadway Market, there is an iron foundry. It's tiny, you won't get to make your own molds, but I'm sure you can go and talk to them, and they'll explain what you would need to do in order to do some iron casting, to get, or rather to have them do the iron casting for you. Any other questions?
Thinking, because obviously we're Conscious Isolation are in collaboration with the University of East London, and because obviously we're broadcasting to students, I was just wondering if you could give one tip, what it would be to either current art students or very kind of early career artists. What tip would you give?
Yes, many things. And before I do that, I've just seen there's something from Jane Cook in the USA, and I want to say, Jane, look after yourself. Jane has just come out of hospital like an hour or two ago. So what the something or other you're doing watching me on the internet, I do not know, but look after yourself, please.
Yeah, get see Jane.
So just that being said, tips, yes. Don't worry, don't stress. I remember graduating from Glasgow, and inevitably the degree show is a massive thing, and we all think it's the most important exhibition we're ever going to do. And of course it isn't. It is important, but you do it, and then the next one is important, and gradually, hopefully, they increase in significance and importance and so on and so forth. If you are meant to be an artist, you will keep being an artist. Don't beat yourself up if you suddenly are having to make the money to pay the rent and feed yourself, pay the mortgage if you're lucky enough to have a mortgage or whatever, and you find it's like 2 months or 6 months or whatever, and you've not made work. You will make work. If you're meant to be doing it and you want to be doing it, you will do it. Build a network of friends, trust your friends. Once you start showing work, mostly what you get is, wonderful show, darling. Mwah, mwah. And you need to have people. Well, okay. Lovely. Yeah, exactly. Actually, excellent point. You know, lovely work, darling. Bye. See you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Excellent mask. You know, build a group of friends that you trust, because everyone needs to have people, friends that are artists that they can go to and go like, I am stuck with this freaking thing. So, you know, I have very close friends around the place, sort of like the artist Alan McGee in Ireland and stuff like that, and I can just message them and go like, residencies. Residencies are just the best thing, and it takes time, but there's like residencies that are easier to get, and then there's the residencies that and fellowships that like you need a really serious career behind you to get. But you'll start with that, and you'll get that. And going to a place, being exposed to a new place, new people, new culture, new sources of materials, and quite often being paid to go do it is just the best thing. It's just like, do you want to come to, you know, do you want to come to Milwaukee and make some work? Yes. You know, go anywhere, try anything, experiment, never give up. Sam.
Hello. Again. I mean, I have actually got loads of questions, but I'm only going to ask you one more.
Bring them on. Go for it.
I'm just conscious that the University of East London kicks us out about 8. we've got a long time.
You got?
Yeah. But no, what I was going to say was that I'm interested with actually just to back up what you were saying with regards to you know, I always say to my students that I've had in the past, don't be a shark, be a wolf. And what I mean by that is be in a pack, not by your own, in a huge ocean. Yep. You know, it's really, really important that you have those.
They're both predators, though.
Yeah, well, yeah, for sure. But I think artists kind of are predators, you know, in a way.
Yeah, we're not kittens.
No, exactly. We have to be made of sterner stuff. Oh, hang on a minute. We've got another question actually. Amanda, Sorry, I can't. I'm dyslexic too. I can't read that.
It says, do you mean Carmarthen, not Carnarvon, re the foundry?
I'm gonna have to check that. Because I haven't been there.
I'll quickly do a Google and see what happens. But while Sam asks the next question,
I think it's Carnarvon. It's a school of arts, and yes. Check that, please, Susie. Sam, question.
Yeah, no. So basically, just the last question. But what I was going to ask you is that it's interesting you speaking about your process. What I'm interested in is that you're using glass as a final sort of object. But what I'd quite like to know is if you would like to start injecting molding silicone. So going back to the real basics of the material, going back to the stone. And also, interestingly, the way that you display things looks a little bit like Richard Long, how he, in installation form, makes these very interesting compositions of juxtapositional objects. But the interesting thing is that he's using stone, so the very start of the process, whilst you're using the very end of it,
But actually, although I do like Richard Long's work, I'm actually more I mean, the whole minimalism and arte povera movement are very, very significant for me. And while I like Richard Long's work, I adore and worship, and I've just gone blank on the name. I hate it. This is typical of me with names. Metal plates, square metal plates on the floor in a grid structure.
Oh God!
We're all like.
I know. May or may not have put his wife out the window and killed her.
Carl Andre.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Carl Andre is very much. There's certain Carl Andre, Chris Burden. Eric Burden was in the Animals.
Chris Burden.
Yanis Cornelis. Roman Signer, those are,
great list.
Richard Serra and so on. They're people. So the very much the geometrics on the floor. Is partially interesting. Coming back on your silicon question, and that the answer to that is, can I let you know in 5 years? Because for a long time, I have a fascination with using a material as it arrives. So the glass, for example, when I went to Alfred to do the fellowship there, the head of glass there had basically said, Angus Powers, and he basically has said, what do you need? And I said, glass, sheet glass, like window glass. He's like, okay. And he just took me down to sort of a storeroom, and there was 2 crates filled with this sort of identical glass, 60 centimeters by 70 centimeters that they'd had donated. It was like 1.5 tons or something. And he just literally said, knock yourself out. Maybe. And it was a dream. So basically I would sort of cart this glass up to the studio and just experiment. And then I'd try something and it would break, and I'd sweep it up and recycle it, and I'd try some more and break. And so the piece with all the glass piled on the chair, that's that glass.
Okay.
Of course, the interesting thing is, so I've always loved the notion of taking, you give me A4, I can make something out of A4. You give me a kilo of metal, I will work out a way to use a kilo of metal, for example. The interesting thing about that work is that work was shipped back to the UK. And then I had to go to my glass supplier, and rather than saying I want 8 foot by 4 foot or 6 foot by 3 foot, whatever is the usual size, I had to go to them and say, okay, I need this exact thickness, which is not usual here, and this exact size, because I shipped the chair back, but there was no point shipping just glass. So found glass then became created glass, if you see what I mean. And in terms of, but now, of course, as I said, I am I'm collaging at the moment, so I've just had a delivery of glittered card, and already I'm cutting that up, so it's no longer. I'm changing it. I'm transforming it. So ask me in 5 years.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, thank you. We must meet up for a pint to.
I'm so up for a pint. I'm just checking if we have any more questions.
I think I can't find the Foundry. I found many other foundries in.
It's not Foundry. It's a university. Hold on 1 second. Oh God. I'm sure it's. Okay, hang on. I think I have a feeling. Yes, it is Carmarthen School of Art. Carmarthen. Apologies to the Welsh.
I think that's all our questions. So it just leaves me to say thank you so much, Ben, for speaking today, and thank you to everyone for attending. And normally we unmute everyone and give a round of applause, but it's not possible. So I think it'll just be me and Sam giving you a round of applause. But thank you so much, Ben. And Emma. Okay. Yeah.